Anger is one of the main emotions that we can name. But did you know that there is usually another emotion under that anger? Hello, residents of the universe. Welcome to Ways to Human. My name is AJ. Anger usually has an underlying emotion. It can stem from being insulted, frustrated, annoyed, threatened, hurt, jealous, insecure, or embarrassed, just to name a few. Anger is a complex emotion that involves various brain regions and physiological responses. It starts in the amygdala, which is responsible for processing emotions like fear and aggression. When you perceive a threat or frustration, the amygdala sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus through the neurotransmitter norepinephrine, which immediately activates the fight or flight response. The hypothalamus then releases corticotropin releasing hormones, or CRH. CRH then travels to another part of the brain, the pituitary gland. This releases adrenocorticotropic hormones, or ACTH, into the bloodstream. The ACTH hormone travels to the adrenal glands located on top of your kidneys, stimulating the release of cortisol, a stress hormone. This happens really fast, even though it sounds like a very long and complex process. Cortisol helps mobilize energy by increasing your glucose level, your blood pressure, and suppressing non essential functions, which is why most people lose their appetite when they're angry. These hormones prepare your body to react quickly by increasing your heart rate, tensing your muscles, and heightening your senses. This process can be beneficial in dangerous situations, but it can be problematic when it happens often. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making and self control, typically helps regulate the amygdala's response. The prefrontal cortex doesn't finish developing until age 25. This is why children and teens often have a harder time dealing with anger and fear related emotional situations. Scientists have discovered that men and women's brains have small differences. The part of the brain that deals with emotional response is bigger in men, and the part that handles logical thinking is smaller in men. But this is actually an evolutionary trait from our hunter gatherer days. This makes sense if you consider the energy needed to be vigilant for self protection in ancient times. Men are wired for hunting, competition, and dominance. Their powerful emotional outbursts of anger were helpful to come out on top during confrontation. However, it has become less and less necessary in the modern world, with women showing that they can provide for themselves. When we are overwhelmed, tired, stressed, or the emotional intensity of the situation is too high, the prefrontal cortex does not function at its best because it is given energy to the fight or flight response. So it fails to regulate the amygdala, leading to an uncontrolled anger response. This is why during moments of rage, we lose all sense of self control and rational thinking, acting in ways we would never act if our prefrontal cortex was performing at its full potential. So if you lose your shit often, now you know what's happening. Lucky for you, there are some things you can do. The first thing you want to accomplish is to bring the brain out of that fight or flight mode so that you don't say or do anything you might later regret. The best way to do this is by first not taking any action as soon as you feel that rush of anger. Take several deep breaths, count to 10, and determine your next step. If you can ask the other person for time to process your thoughts, you should do that. Our brain works best when the prefrontal cortex is fully engaged, as it gives you the opportunity to use your full logical capabilities. After you take a few moments, remember that the best way to solve the crisis is by swapping one neurochemical for another. That is all anger is. It is a chemical reaction taking place inside your brain. You are in control. As I mentioned earlier, the release of norepinephrine is responsible for the reaction of anger. What is the opposite of anger? Happiness, joy. The most well known neurotransmitter related to happiness and pleasure, dopamine. So anything that makes you happy will work. For me, it's music. If you can sing along out loud, or if you actually play music, even better. Exercise, take a walk, go running, do some art, or even take a cold or hot shower. If you're in a public setting, you can try the first few relaxation techniques. But if you're able to give yourself time to process your anger and your rational thinking part of your brain comes back online, you will realize that so many of those outbursts of anger were preventable. So many of today's problems in society could be solved by people not reacting so harshly to the instant release of neurotransmitters. Don't forget to like and subscribe.